Good evening and welcome. I'm Diane Meyerhoff, host for tonight's school budget presentation with Obeng, the superintendent of the Burlington School District. Tonight's show is being aired live. We welcome your comments and questions. Please join the conversation at 862-3966. Thank you, so much for coming out tonight.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Pleasure. It's a pleasure to have you. So you're going to tell us about the budget and what voters need to know for a town meeting, yes?
Absolutely. I mean, I've got a bit of a slide deck I'm going to pass through, and we've shared at the board through the board process, and it's also found on our website. So people want to go to a website, they can go through that, because I'll try to sort of expedite the process instead of spending 90 minutes showing the slides.
Yeah, we don't have 90,
you want to probably have some conversations in between, so I'll do some highlights and skip through some things and move right along. So.
Good. And tell us, what is the website if folks want to look up the presentation?
www.bsdvt.org.
bsdvt.org.
Yeah, or just type in Burlington School District and you can do a search.
All right, fantastic, good. So tell us what we need to know.
All right, so let me start by talking about every year, our process, and if you can see the slides here, we start with a input process, consultation with our community members, and we had about 4 public open forums, and people came out.
And I bet they came out.
People do come out, yes, people do come out, and they have lots to say, lots to contribute.
Good.
We do ask them some challenging questions as well, because we just don't want the wants, but we're also talking about the needs and some of the things that'll push us forward. But some of the things we did differently this year is we targeted some groups that we felt the voices weren't heard in the past. So we looked at, we had some sessions for special ed, in particular special ed parents, and we looked at ELL groups.
Which you should say what that is.
EL, English language
learners,
learners, right? The new language is EL as opposed to ELL.
Oh, okay, so, new one for me. Okay, thank you.
So, and then of course we spend some time with our staff and our we have a strategic plan with 9 priority teams, and ask them what do they think is needed in their priority areas in order to move us forward. And of course, our principals and staff that we've had input from. And also, people can always go on to the website and do an online submission if they haven't had an opportunity to attend one of those, or go to their local school and just put something on paper or that sort to.
And that'll all get back to you.
That all gets back.
Excellent.
And I'm going to talk a little bit about that as we move forward. So. Just quickly, I'm going to go through this slide quickly. So one of the things we do is we synthesize some of the materials that we're hearing. And you can see on this slide that there's a number of themes that come through. And some of these themes are pretty consistent every year. People talk about energy efficiency, which is a good thing. They talk about increased supports for social services and some of our social needs. And of course, things that will help our academic achievement, right? So that's pretty consistent in terms of some of the themes. So you can see a list of things that came through the conversations.
Anything unusual or surprising for you?
Actually, nothing surprising, to be honest with you. I think everything
probably good.
Yeah, no, it's good. Everything that we heard that people would think of pretty came through, right? Anything we can support.
Looks pretty significant list.
Yeah, so when I slide to the next list, you'll see we tried to, whoops, gone a little too far. We tried to do a little bit of analysis on this to look at, based on the input that we have, what people are saying, okay, what would that cost us if we actually added all those things? And it was over $6 million worth of.
And how much is the school budget? To give us a sense of what the $6 million is?
The school budget is under $85 million over the entire budget.
Okay.
And people get confused because there's 2 different sections. There's the education fund section, which taxpayers actually vote on. Then there's the school budget, the entire budget. When you see the entire budget, it's inclusive of grants and other things that we get.
Okay.
So sometimes they see that, hey, your budget's going down, you're asking for more, but what that just means is we're not able to capture more grants.
Gotcha. So actually $6 million is not that bad on $85 million.
Well, yeah.
It depends how you look at it, right?
Well, $6 million on top of the education side that we need to add.
Okay.
That's quite significant. So last year, it came up to about 5. Actually, really, if you look at this, it's probably a little bit more based on what staff said. Actually, more than that. Last year, the requests were around $5 million, and we're able to add $1.5 million. Wow. And we still had a considerable tax increase. So $6 million would make a
huge. Okay. So we won't be doing all those things.
We will not be doing all those things, but it's good for us to kind of reflect on that and understand that these are things that people are saying that would help us contribute. The thing that we have to consider when we go through this and we talk with our board and community members about is the budget pressures. So what's putting pressure on our budget for this current year? We have some capital infrastructure challenges, and fortunately last year people supported a bond to look at all our schools, but we still have some challenges at the high school and things that we have to look at. Of course, salaries and benefits. We have 8 bargaining units. You know, people sort of often talk about the teachers, but we have 7 other units that we do that don't really get a lot of publicity around their actions, but all those contracts have to be integrated into the next year's budget in terms of the increases. And then healthcare was a big conversation this year. So there was a challenge about healthcare where the state put in some legislation that took money away from us, right? So over about $500,000 away from us, which we couldn't capture, but yet we still had to make up those costs. So that's, you know, challenges for us in terms of trying to find those pieces. And then lastly on this slide, the legislative environment through this $50 million deficit in the education fund for the whole state. That has to be made up somehow. And that usually means at the local level, right? Our taxpayers have to find a way. So we consider those things in terms of doing analysis of what we can actually establish. And I'll skip through some of this quickly, but you know, some of the other things around retirement funds and things we pay to the city for pensions and universal preschool investments that have to come in, and then the other supports that we identified that we sort of must do, right?
And I think we hear this from, at least from all of the superintendents that have come in and I've spoken with,
right.
Very similar pressures. Everyone has that same list,
Absolutely, absolutely. The thing for us in terms of some of the social emotional pieces is that we find that in Burlington, we do have agencies that support some of these, so we attract people who come here for services, and therefore students get into our systems and parents, so then we end up picking up a lot of that, and we welcome that opportunity, but we don't necessarily always have the resources to support them. Here's a good example of what happens in the grants, because one of the things we're trying to do is explain the budget process to our community in terms of the differences for us as Burlington and differences for the rest of Vermont, right? So in special education, we do receive a special education block grant. And if you look at this slide, you can see BSD, we average 34.57 FTEs. Those are like teacher positions for special ed. And the wage that we pay, the average wage is about $72,000. Now the average across the state for that same position is $63,000. So there's a difference for us of about $9,000. So when we pay our staff for those positions, we have a $9,000 cost to it. But the state only gives us the average, which is 63. So at the end of the day, you'll see we end up with a difference of $327,000. So we still have to make up that difference. Now some districts, they may have a lower cost in terms of paying those staff. So they could actually make some money on receiving those grants or break even. But we don't break even based on our wage calculations there. So those are some of the things. Sometimes people say, well, we get grants for that. Yeah, we do, but it doesn't cover everything, right? So some of the things that when we're starting the budget, there are strategic priorities that we look at. So investing in our strategic goals and priorities, we spend a lot of time looking at what we need to focus on. We can't do everything and do it well. We have to focus on a few things. We've established 3 main goals: inclusive, sustainable finance and facilities, equitable climate and culture, and inclusive teaching and learning are our big rocks, we call them, or things that we want to focus on. We also invest on some of the strategic priorities around student, staff, and program and capital facilities things. And of course, sustaining the supports that we already have. We want to sustain, we don't want to go backwards. We want to be able to make sure we have a budget that sustains and then look forward to move forward. We're using data to inform some of our decisions, right? I think in the past, sometimes we've just sort of like said, hey, that might be a good idea. Let's just do that, or let's do this. So we're trying to use the data and the metrics to say, this worked really well because A, B, and C, so therefore we didn't need to invest in this. And this, we don't know if it worked well, so maybe we should try something else or stop doing that and reallocate dollars to things that we know are effective. And at the end of the day, we also want to use an equity lens around how we allocate staffing and things like that, because we do have some demographics that are different in different parts of the city, and also in terms of the staff allocation, we have to make sure that we do that. So we've added what's called an equity index to reallocation to make sure that we give our schools what they need, not necessarily an equal distribution, but an equity distribution. And I'll skip this slide because it just talks about our development. One of the things I do want to talk about, though, is our central office reductions. Because often when we start the budget process and we ask people, okay, where do you think we can save dollars? Consistently, everyone says central office, administration. That's pretty consistent. You know, and to be fair, that's not just unique to Burlington. I think that's everywhere. Yeah. Every district I've been to, they've always said, cut the fat at the top, right? Right. And one of the things, you know, and I came here a couple of years ago, I think we wanted to lead with that because we knew people would be wanting to see that. And we started, you can see that we had about 450,000 in reductions the first year, and then the next year we went to 150,000. So we've asked our central office staff to do the best they can in reducing, and they're trying to manage with what they have, but I think we had to set that example if we're going to look at other areas in terms of reduction. So I wanted to make sure that people knew that, yes, we're aware that we need to look at that area as well as the other areas as well too. I'll glance through this slide because it just speaks to more around some of the things that we're required to spend, which adds pressure on our budgets in terms of having to meet. And then, so we need a focus as to allocation of our budget. And so we decided on these areas in terms of allocation. One, we want to make sure that we meet the AOE equitable standards, quality standards, especially for class sizes and things. There's a lot of conversations around teacher ratios and class ratios from the state this year, and we wanted to make sure we stay true to the standards that we have established in terms of our allocations. Other areas around increased social emotional supports. So I know you've heard from other districts in terms of that's a huge challenge. Yes. And that's a challenge for us as well too. I mean, you can't get to learning if you can't take of sort of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? People's own students' self-belonging and their sense of wellness to start their learning. One of the things we wanted to ensure we keep is our multilingual liaisons. So there's sort of our cultural ambassadors in our schools, and the funding for this actually comes from the federal level. And there's been a vacuum from the federal grants in the last year or so. They've taken away dollars, and these are dollars that we had, and we need this resource. So we can't get rid of it. So we decided that was a priority that we wanted to shift some dollars so we can ensure that we maintain it. And of course, our priority goal set by our board is around closing the achieving gap and raising the bar. So we want to make sure we allocate resources to that and restorative practices. And that goes with the achievement gap and sort of the sense of wellness for our students in terms of being able to problem solve and create environments that they're able to aspire to, right? I know I'm going quickly here, but I've got a 90-minute presentation. I'm trying to get it in.
No, you're doing great. We're doing great. When I start to look that quizzical, you'll know that I've lost me. So.
I'll do this quickly. One of the things I wanted to talk about this year was around enrollment, right, numbers. So lots of conversations. People look at different data sets and they'll say, well, we're increasing our numbers. We should be getting more and this and that. But in Burlington, we actually haven't increased, and we decreased slightly. If you looked at a chart, a graph of ours, we'd be looking like this. We'd go down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, but kind of plateauing a little bit and slightly down, but nothing huge, but we're not growing, right? As opposed to, I know my counterpoints in South Burlington, they had a bit of a spike this year. They were doing like what we were doing, but they had...
And Winooski, same.
Winooski, right. So one of the things that has caused us to go down a little bit is in the past, we've received numbers of students from refugees, and we haven't had the same influx. And that was, you know, about 200 kids or so. That was the difference from us always spiking up.
And what do you think that's about? Do you have a sense of that? Is it housing costs?
No, we just haven't. They just haven't been sent here because of federal kind of so they haven't been sent here.
And you maybe were counting on that.
Well, that's what's happened in the past, right? So we were always predictive of having that a certain amount of influx. It could come back, right? But you never know, right? So. But we've kind of pretty much stayed the same. If you look at this chart here, in FY17, we budgeted for 986 students at the high school, but we actually had 946, right? Then the following year, we kept the budget at 986, but we actually had 937. And then for next year,
staying with that number there.
We said at 986, we're at 964. So we're actually been under, and you know, I know we've had some challenges from people saying that, oh, I see a lot of kids, but these are the numbers. These are numbers, and we budgeted for more than we have, so we should be able to accommodate more than we have there. Fortunately, we do have a bubble in grade 9 this year. We have a good cohort, so hopefully if that trend continues, we'll be able to maintain at a higher level. So I'll skip the K-8 stuff. And then this was the equity index I was talking about. This is a simplistic sort of view for people where they can see. There's an example of 2 schools, right? Both have projected enrollment at 414 or 415, pretty much the same. But at the end of the day, you can see at the last block there, there's a share allocation of 39% and 61%. And that's, the factors are because of the number of IEPs, the poverty count that we have, and the EL count, right? So you can see the different numbers in there.
That's
and
interesting.
then that gives you the share. So then we decide, okay, we need to add this many more resources to that school because they have a 60% share rather than 39%, right? So it's not equal. It's not like everyone gets one based on your needs, because some areas have more things to challenge with.
Interesting,
right? So that's a basic sort of look at that. All right. So now we get to the good stuff. This is the stuff I like in terms of the
facilities.
Well, not just facilities, but we do need facilities, but because that is conducive to learning as well too. But these are our goals, our big goals that we want to achieve. So the first goal is around sustainable finance and facilities. That's one of the goals, anyways.
Sure.
And there's we have good rationale around there. We know there's lots of literature that if you have good spaces, then you have good learning, right?
Yep. And we tend to have older schools. Is that fair to say?
We have all our schools need work. And we published a document last year. You can find it on our site as well too, in terms of some of the needs we have in our schools. And you know what? It's pretty much systemic across the country. When districts and boards are looking at saving money, they have to make a choice sometimes, right?
Sure.
It's between either people, or you can not repair that ceiling. Where they usually go to, they usually not repair the ceiling.
And then what happens to the ceiling?
It opens, it cracks on the people, right? And then eventually at some point you go, oh, we didn't put enough money to, and we have to go back and do something.
It's hard. That's. I think we all have that in our own homes. We have those situations.
That's right, exactly. It's like home planning. So you can see on the bottom here that we're in year 1 of our capital plan of renewing the buildings and doing so that's a good thing. And then we added some minor pieces here that fall under this goal around we need some bus drivers for special ed buses, and we're looking at developing an international program in Burlington, which is going to be great culturally in terms of bringing in immigrant students from other countries. But these are students that actually might be a little different than the traditional we've had, because they come with a different set of assets, right? So they'll be coming with families that can maybe afford to send them away for a year and come back, and looking to go into postgraduate here. At the same time, because of the cultural exchange, it's going to be great for our kids. It's also a revenue generator. So we'll be able to generate some dollars that we can put back into the system. So looking forward to expanding on that initiative there. So it's just a minor investment there to get that. And then the other big rock that we have is equitable climate and culture. And this is sort of the belly, the foundation that we talked about, around some of the real social, emotional, and behavioral challenges that we have, that we need to set our students up before they can actually be prepared for learning. And you can see a list of some of the things. And this is, I wish we could add much more, but we have to balance between what we believe the public can afford and are willing to support, and what's critical in terms of our needs. And so we do quite a bit of analysis with our staff when we've got it, and then we got to make some decisions, and then finally to the board to say, hey, this is what we can do with. Can we add more? Yes, we would love to, but we have to be reasonable. And you can see a range of things. We talked about the multilingual liaisons, special education supports. We definitely need that. Social workers in our schools, and in light of some of the things that have happened in Florida and things like that, that we need to, the mental wellness for our kids, and being able to identify and support students before they get into tragic stages, that we need to stay ahead of that curve. The board has put forward an equity recruitment hiring initiative. We want us to look at diversifying our workforce. And of course, we need strategies and resources to do that. And a number of other things around summer schools, keeping learning for students all year round. When we hold our summer schools, which is an excellent program, by the way, where students get an opportunity to get some academics, they get some recreational, they get some arts base, and it's all free, right?
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, and we have waiting lists every year.
Wow.
Right, so it's hard to accommodate everyone. So this will allow us to accommodate more students and resist that summer slide that happens, right, when there's 2 months of just laying around and having a good time.
Although it sounds kind of good.
It does sound good, yeah. But then, you know what, if you ever go to the summer, the kids are having a good time.
I'm
they have
sure,
this little balance of fun and learning at the
Good.
same time. So it's kind of neat to have that kind of program. And then finally, this is the big part. This is a big part of our work in terms of the academic achievement piece, right, around inclusive teaching and learning. So we work with our curriculum departments and looking at what we need to do in terms of improving achievement for our students. And you know, we've identified the achievement gap as a goal, closing the gap and raising the bar. And I'll take a moment to talk about that just quickly. Because one of the things that people sometimes will assume that if we're working on an achievement gap, that we're only focused on a certain cohort of students who are underachieving. But we're talking about closing the gap while raising the bar. So that means that the students at the top, we expect them to keep pushing up. So the strategies we're looking for are universal strategies that'll help all students. And then hopefully we'll have fewer students to do the intervention pieces. And the literature out there and the research out there and schools that have found success can show in their data that they close the gap and the kids at the top end continue to move up. So we're hoping.
Challenging.
It's challenging. Oh, it's challenging. I mean, it's a national crisis really in terms of trying to manage that. But we're up for the challenge, and we've got a good team together, and we're making some good plans, and I'm looking forward to gradual process. This doesn't happen overnight, of course. No. But we're going to put the wheels in motion so we can get there. A lot of other supports around ELL staffing, middle schools, we have some challenges there. Looking at professional development for our paraeducators, right? It's something that they've asked for, they want to be included, and we think they should be. And so we have to find time and resources in order to support them to be included on that. So, and
we've got about 5 minutes.
Okay.
So if you want to skip ahead,
skip ahead to.
I want to make sure you get to the punch line.
I'll get to the punch line. Well, let me just say that I showed you the slide previously around the reductions to central office.
Yes.
And this year, we've actually
done it again.
Okay. Close to about $440,000 that we've been able to reduce to put into the pot, because our central office said the things that we're going after are really important, and they're willing to try to find ways to work differently in order to support our students. So kudos to our staff, because partly because they did it because I asked them to,
right.
But a lot of them really believe in what we're doing. Let me slide forward to the tax impact, because I know what people would want to know.
That's what people are going to be voting on, right?
So let me find a good slide for you.
Okay. And don't forget, we love your calls. We do have a couple of minutes. 862-3966.
Here we are. These are the variables that impact our taxes, right? So we have education spending. Right, so this is the education part that I talked about. Like there's the 84 million, but then there's a 61 million. But our budget is actually increasing less than 1%. So that's really marginal. Okay. And our equalized pupil, which is in the calculations, is declining. As I said, we're declining, but not significantly so. And then our homestead dollar rate, that's the yield that we get for each dollar that's spent, which is also declining. So all these numbers are working against us together. But the one that's really hitting us hard right now is our CLA, which is the common level of appraisal, which is 79.2. When it's under 80, the city must kind of do a review, and they've started to do that.
We're just barely under it, huh?
Well, we are under it, And so they're doing a review. But I'll tell you, I think South Burlington is like 95.3, and Winooski is like 93. So you can see the difference between.
It's been a long time since we've done that.
Right. Yeah. So that's a factor for us as well too. So if I think I can get to the tax impact. Oops. Sorry. So you can go onto the site and you can see we have an average home here. What would that mean?
Yeah, people like those numbers. Can you just give us that one actually?
Sure.
Yeah, let's do that one. I always do that. That's one of my things.
So here it is. Here's the tax impact.
Okay.
So
this is
on a 250 homestead.
Okay, and that's assessed value from the city. Yep.
Right. So the difference, so it would be $358, and if you were doing income sensitivity, it comes to about $24.
Oh, okay.
Right. So
okay.
So
right. Depending on the income. Yep.
Depending on income.
All right.
You can see that. I'll go back to one slide because I think that's where it has some more of the tax. So here are the numbers. You can see the total budget, the education spending, and the spending we're actually going to be doing, and the property tax impact is 7.9, which is high considering it's only less than 1%. But that's because of the variable numbers
Because of the common level appraisal, and we kind of got hit on that.
If we had the same, we had the same numbers we had last year, we would actually be looking at a tax decrease. So that's what happens.
So we got to get those numbers fixed.
So those numbers change. And those numbers will even change from now until June.
Wow.
So even after people vote on the,
they'll be different.
Well, yeah. If you look at the trends from years past, you've seen that some of the numbers have changed afterwards. So people vote on one number, so that's one of the things that frustrates me around the process we have in Vermont. Is like we start our budget in October.
Right.
You vote on it in March, but really by June is what you see what really happens.
It's almost 3/4 of a year.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's kind of awkward to say, hey, this is it, but then people pay something different. Sometimes it could be less, sometimes it could be a little bit more. Hopefully this year it will be more, especially with the CLA. If that changes a little bit, that's going to be less for taxpayers, and we'll still be able to get the investments that we need to move forward.
Right.
So that's a quick snapshot. I know I skipped through a lot, but hopefully it gives people analysis of how we've tried to balance our needs with taxpayers' needs as well too, and still supporting our students.
Sure, sure. Wow. Well, thank you. That was a lot of information. But I guess this is kind of the takeaway at this point, anyway. What you're looking at in terms of and how it'll affect an individual homeowner, and really a big difference between those who pay. Help me out with the right words. Who pay the full amount versus the
income
sensitivity amount. I'm not sure if that's the right way to say it, but that's pretty dramatic. I didn't realize it'd be that much of a difference. So that's that's good. I mean, from $358 to $24, and that's an annual number too. I always like try to remind folks of that, because sometimes people don't realize we pay them in quarters or something. So,
and I think some of the proposals out there around at the state level is to look at restructuring that in some way.
Okay.
So we'll see what happens. There's lots of conversations and lots of dialogue around what needs to happen, but at the same time, hope they come up with something that actually puts money into education as opposed to just
there is sort of talk of moving the pie around a little bit.
I hope it's because you might end up paying the same, but in different ways.
Right. Well, which is a lot of what taxes do sometimes, I think. But
so at the end of the day, we have to invest in education at some point. So we're just going to find the best way to do it.
And it's also interesting because Burlington is sort of an outlier as opposed to many of the other communities, and statewide at least. And Burlington and Chittenden County, probably the core of Chittenden County.
Yes.
So sometimes things affect us differently, as you showed us, than it does in other. And that's something that happens along with that when they're mixing up that pot, right?
And there's nothing wrong with being different. Just in these cases, you don't want. You wish you were.
We want to be different on the high side, rather than the low side. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you again, Yaw Obeng, Superintendent of Burlington Schools. Thanks so much for coming out. And remember, the information is available on the website, all the budget information and where to vote and all those things are all available. And on town meeting day, Tuesday, March 6th, don't forget to vote. You don't have to vote that day. As I'm constantly reminded, you can go down to City Hall and vote anytime with early voting. So we hope you'll take advantage of that, and stay tuned to Channel 17 for more town meeting coverage. Thank you and good night.